Part 44. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 431. It's you. Shueishaoken's face was pale, and his eyes were shocked as he looked at the black figure blocking everyone's path not far ahead. The pupils under the prajna mask were deep, and there was a faint flash of blood in his eyes. Hunting in black robes seemed to have been waiting for them here for a long time. Xue Xiaokong never expected that the mysterious masked man in Xiao Yunyi's team would be the one who stopped them at the critical moment. Reminiscing that the latter was also a scientific researcher from Zilan base, a bold idea came to his mind. He clenched his teeth, frowned, and unconsciously stretched his left hand towards the neck wearing the mechanical collar. "Are they still looking for you?" Several of the men beside them looked around and found that there was only the prajna mask man in front of them, with a look of determination on his face. "Boss, leave quickly, we will cover you." After saying that, several sturdy men pounced on the black-robed figure in the distance without any explanation. These strong men were also covered in bruises, and even the weapons they used were lost. Even so, they are still willing to use their own flesh and blood to delay time for Xue Xiaokong and open a way out. However, the next second, the masked man not far in front of them suddenly raised his head. A pair of blood-red pupils emerged from the bottom of the eyes, with 6 megatamas circling around each eye, like a blood moon overlapping. Along with an indescribable power, an invisible wave rippled out in an instant. In an instant, the strong men who rushed towards the masked man actually fell to the ground with their eyes turned white and fell into a faint before they even got within a few feet of him. Xue Xiaokong, who was seriously injured in the distance, spit out blood at the moment he was hit by this momentum, staggered and almost fell to the ground. Weakly covering his chest, his face was completely pale. "I didn't expect you to be the one who hides the most among that group of people." The pressure brought by the seemingly ordinary figure in front of him was even more powerful than Yefanyan holding the golden sword. The masked man remained silent and slowly walked towards Xue Xiaokong. "I can't tell that your men are quite loyal to you." The corners of Mu Qiu's mouth raised under the mask, and pale-faced awakeners fell one after another beside him. Indeed, in such a cruel background of the end of the world, it is not easy to have such a group of subordinates who risk their lives for themselves. A clear and slightly teasing voice reached Xue Xiaokong's ears, but the latter's face was filled with a heavy look. "The matter has come to an end. If I want to be killed or chopped into pieces, please forgive me. I, Xue Xiaokong, am worthy of the righteousness of my brothers." "You are quite brave." Mu Qiu walked slowly a few meters away from Xue Xiaokong, and behind her lay a group of awakened people with their eyes turned white. "With your strength, you should not be an aborigine of the town. Where do you and your men come from?" Mu Qiu looked down at Xue Xiaokong and asked. Xue Xiaokong, who had the ability to control magnetism, was considered a malleable talent, so Mu Qiu did not directly use the ability to search for souls and restrain souls. However, when Mu Qiu finished speaking, Xue Xiaokong's face first showed a look of astonishment. Immediately he seemed to understand something, and a bitter smile emerged from the corner of his mouth. "You must not be from Zilan base, right?" "Oh." Mu Qiu was a little curious as to how Xue Xiaokong could infer that his identity was fake from just one sentence. Xue Xiaokong's eyes showed deep resentment, and he suddenly tore off the tattered leather jacket covering his neck. A collar-like mechanical device was revealed around the neck, and he said in a hateful voice, "Because the device that is about to kill me was made by scientific research experts from the Zilan base." A look of determination appeared in Xue Xiaokong's eyes, bloodshot eyes spread, he raised his head and looked at Mu Qiu. "My former identity, was the leader of the first battle group of Qingyang base, Xue Xiaokong. Boss Xue, who occupies a small town in Yufang, is actually the captain from a large base in Yufang. And Qingyang base is the destination that Yefanyan and others will arrive at this time." After hearing Xue Xiaokong's self-introduction, Mu Qiu showed some interest at this time. What makes you come to this border town to occupy land and become king? Even if an S-level powerhouse is placed in a large base, he is still a mainstay, let alone an awakener with rare powers like Xue Xiaokong. It is really difficult to understand why the other party would let go of such a potential stock who has the opportunity to be promoted to the destruction level. Mentioning the reason, a trace of blood appeared on Xue Xiaokong's pale face. Holding the mechanical collar around his neck with one hand, the flames of hatred ignited in his eyes. I chose to escape by myself. The root of everything starts with the scientist who suddenly appeared. Immediately afterwards, Xue Xiaokong told Mu Qiu the reason why he and his men ended up here. The general story is that since a scientist came to Qingyang base not long ago, he was warmly received by the leader of the base. Scientists stationed in the base brought a lot of convenience to the base. At the same time, the powerful leader of the base began to change his temperament. Not only did they switch from a defensive strategy to attacking the surrounding ruins, they also regarded the human lives in the base as nothing. Even the awakened ones were driven by it like cattle and horses, and the base suffered heavy losses in battle after battle. Xue Xiaokong and other senior members of the base tried to persuade the leader, but the result was that they were put on such a mechanical collar to control their actions. I knew that the leader could not turn back and there was no hope of persuasion, so I took the opportunity to use the ability of magnetic control to destroy the key of the control collar and fled the base with my people. The veins on Xue Xiaokong's arm holding the mechanical collar bulged. But this collar contains a powerful bomb that can destroy a building. When I destroyed the key, I also activated the self-destruction program inside. Xue Xiaokong pointed to a layer of the collar, which showed a string of numbers -43. This means that he still has 43 days to live. And the initiator of all the tragedies, that scientist, is a remnant from the Zilan base. So you regard me, who also came from the Zilan base, as the last straw. Mu Qiu suddenly realized that it was no wonder that the other party tried every means to keep him in the town. It turned out that he wanted the expert to save his life. Xue Xiaokong nodded, then shook his head with a wry smile. He didn't expect that the one he finally invited was not the savior who saved his life, but the evil star that brought him destruction. His life was about to come to an end, and the words he said now were undoubtedly his last words. What if I say that I can give you a chance to live? As soon as these words came out, Xue Xiaokong suddenly raised his head, with hope in his eyes. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 432. Do you really mean what you say? Xue Xiaokong's eyes changed, and for the first time, a strange color appeared in the eyes of the masked man in front of him. If you can save my life, then Xue Xiaokong is willing to be driven by you, go through fire and water, no matter what. Xue Xiaokong staggered to his feet, with traces of blood spilling from the corners of his mouth. It's just a deal. Wearing a dark red prajna mask on her head, Mu Qiu slowly raised a finger and stood in front of her. Suddenly, the black windbreaker reflected the slender figure, and the dark shadow made waves like the tide. Immediately afterwards, a shocking scene happened. The black shadow under Mu Qiu's feet spread at a speed visible to the naked eye, swallowing everything around him in an instant. The boundless black curtain swept over, and in the darkness, Xue Xiaokong felt trembling from the bottom of his soul. In just a few breaths, the surrounding world fell into darkness. Only at the far end of his vision could he vaguely see a few strange traces of red blood. Mu Qiu raised her head and looked at the blood-red realm, her eyes deep. The speed of self-healing is still a bit slow. The black shadow space has been shattered after a battle at the level of digital sources. After a period of self-repair, it can barely be put into use. Mu Qiu thought to herself that there seemed to be an opportunity to swallow some spatial energy to speed up the healing of the shadow space. Here it is. Xue Xiaokong looked at the dark space around him in disbelief. This was the first time he had seen such a miraculous method. Next, a path lit by flames suddenly appeared in front of Xue Xiaokong. Mu Qiu waved his hand, and a dark token burning with black flames appeared in front of Xue Xiaokong. Go through this passage, and if you survive, hand this token to anyone you see. Xue Xiaokong looked at the long corridor burned by flames in front of him, as if it was a long bridge leading to hell, and behind him was a pitch-black bottomless abyss. The choice between life and death is up to you. Mu Qiu said in a calm tone. Today's black shadow space has just been restored, and there are still many unstable factors. Mu Qiu set the coordinates at the Yuhei base, where there were many scientific research experts from Zilan, so it would not be a problem to unlock a mechanical collar. According to Mu Qiu's estimation, there is a 40% chance of being caught in the turbulence of space and being shattered into pieces if one rashly travels through the shadow space that has not yet healed. There is also a nearly 30% chance of being assimilated into the dark world and becoming a member of the shadows. The world of shadows was beginning to recover, and Mu Qiu happened to be looking for someone to be a test subject. Hearing the words in his ears, Xue Xiaokong stepped onto the path wrapped in flames without any hesitation. Rather than waiting for death, he is more willing to test the 1 in 10,000 possibility. The black-robed figure behind him stands in the sky, surrounded by black energy, as if he is the only god in this world. Xue Xiaokong stepped onto the fire road, but suddenly looked back at the masked figure. May I take the liberty of asking, who is your excellency? The black energy around the masked man suddenly boiled and turned into balls of ferocious flame surrounding all directions, like the most loyal believer. The pupils under the ferocious Prajna mask were blood red. A domineering and magnetic voice came from under the mask. Bawang Yetu, my lord rises and falls. In an instant, a huge bloody pupil suddenly appeared behind the black-robed figure, and a red-haired shadow appeared behind it. The moment the bloody pupil appeared, Xue Xiaokong's brain buzzed and went blank. Until the red-haired figure appeared in the void, Xue Xiaokong's eyes were filled with horror, and his face was full of horror. His lips moved, and after a few breaths he spoke in a trembling voice. Eternal, Lord of Eternal Night. In the small town after the fog receded, several figures were walking through the streets littered with corpses. Yao Yuan dragged the body of an orc awakener from the steel-armored chariot and looked at his damaged precious car with distressed eyes. If you want to repair it now, it will take a while. The other few people also killed the remaining survivors, but the price in exchange was covered in scars and blood. Yefanyan's slender figure stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by cyclones. In her right hand, the broken sword was still flowing with mottled blood. Fanyan, I really didn't expect you to be so powerful. You can't even match that boss Xue. Xiao Yunyi came from behind with a cheerful face. I don't know when he put on a neat suit again, with a charming smile on his handsome face, full of charm. However, there was an imperceptible greedy desire in his seemingly smiling eyes. Even he had never expected that Yefanyan was hidden so deeply. The powerful power in the previous fierce battle with Xue Xiaokong even made him feel extremely palpitated. However, this also strengthened Xiao Yunyi's idea of trying to conquer Yefanyan. As long as Yefanyan is brought into the harem, his strength will not only increase greatly after the Yuanyan intercourse. In the future, even Yefanyan's father's position as city lord will naturally be inherited by him, and he, Xiao Yunyi, will also completely establish the throne as the ruler of Yungziao city. Thinking of this, Xiao Yunyi looked at Yefanyan's exquisite body, and the desire in his heart became more intense. Watching this scene, Xiaoman secretly felt a fire of jealousy. At this moment, Zhuangqiang, who was wearing round-rimmed glasses, came from a distance, carrying two unconscious men in his hands. Zhuangqiang looked at Yefanyan and Xiao Yunyi and shook his head. These people are all the men recruited by Boss Xue after he took over the town. They don't know the origin of Boss Xue. I just often hear Boss Xue murmuring the name of a scientist. I have forgotten who it is. Zhuang Qiang's ability is to capture souls, and he couldn't be better at this kind of torture. Everyone who heard the news was slightly surprised. As a result, Boss Shue's clues were completely cut off. Ye Fanyan frowned. Have you found any trace of Mu Qiu and Jing Jing? The others shook their heads. Even after searching the entire block, they could not find any trace of the two of them. Ye Fanyan's heart suddenly sank to the bottom, and her watery eyes were full of worry. Could they? Suddenly, there was a clear sound of footsteps from across the block. Everyone hurriedly turned around and saw Mu Qiu's slender figure walking slowly from the horizon not far ahead. The crimson mask on his head was taken off, a spring-like smile hung on his handsome face, and he held a sleeping girl with twin ponytails in his arms. Sorry for the long wait. Mu Qiu narrowed her eyes and was about to speak. However, there was a gust of fragrant wind blowing in front of him, and Ye Fanyan had already walked forward quickly. Are you okay? Mu Qiu was stunned for a moment, then narrowed her eyes and smiled. Fine. Ye Fanyan looked around at Mu Qiu and Jing Jing nervously, the worry in his eyes not yet gone away. In the distance, Xiao Yunyi, who was about to say hello to Ye Fanyan, was frozen in place, and a strange color flashed in his eyes when he looked at Mu Qiu. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 433. Swoosh. A hurricane roared, and on a mountain forest road, a fierce-looking steel chariot was shuttling through the forest at a high speed. The outer shell of the steel armor was muddy and dirty, and even stained with mottled blood. The deeper you drive into southern Xinjiang, the worse the surrounding environment becomes. The ground is wet, and the terrain is steep. The trees and plants here are not restrained by humans, and they grow wildly. There are also some dangerous mutant plants hidden among them, which spread their hideous tentacles to the creatures passing by. The steel-armored chariot sped all the way, and it didn't even encounter any zombie monsters that pounced on it along the way. If it were placed in other regions, it would be an extremely strange thing. However, in this southern Xinjiang with rainforests everywhere, the most dangerous monsters are not mutant zombies, but mutant beasts that are multiplying like mushrooms after rain. Sitting on the modified off-road vehicle are Ye Fanyan and others who have experienced the battle in the town. In the town occupied by Boss Shui and his men, they dealt with the remaining men of Boss Shui, collected the supplies in the town and set off again. We found a large number of weapons and firearms in the warehouse in the attic of the parking lot, and there would be no such weapons and equipment with great lethality in the nearby towns. Zhuang Qiang sat in the back and spoke to everyone. A gleam of light flashed under his round-framed glasses, and pointed to a corner on the map. From this, it can be inferred that Boss Shui and his men are likely to come from the nearest large base, Qingyang base. Although they did not find out the origin of Boss Shui from the mouths of those minions, Zhuang Qiang still found some clues from some clues. When they heard that Boss Shui and his men might actually come from the destination of their trip, everyone's faces suddenly became a little weird. How sure are you about this possibility? Yao Yuan, who was driving an off-road vehicle, looked at Zhuang Qiang and hesitated. Www. If there was really something wrong with the Qingyang base, then their trip would be in vain. Xiao Yunyi shook his head and said with a firm look. No matter what, we have to go and take a look. After all, if we want to return to the base as soon as possible, the only way is the space portal of Qingyang base. Zhuang Qiang nodded, but his eyes inadvertently glanced at a figure behind him, with a look of surprise in his eyes. Yu, wearing a black windbreaker, leaned against the car door, supported his chin with one hand, and leisurely looked at the scenery beside the car. Compared with the anxious worries of others, Yu seemed to have a peaceful aura, and there was no trace of sadness in him. Almost at the moment when Zhuang Qiang's eyes came, Yu turned his head and smiled at him. The former smiled back awkwardly and turned his head away in a hurry. After the battle in the town came to an end, Yu just walked out with the girl Jingjing in his arms. When asked about the whereabouts of the two, Yu said that Boss Shui intended to keep him, so he took Yu to the attic far away from the battlefield in the block while everyone was in a fantasy. "Brother Chu." The girl's delicate voice came to his ears. Yu turned his head and saw the girl with twin ponytails sitting next to him handing him a candy. Jingjing's memory was still frozen in the foggy battlefield, when many awakened people rushed towards her and Yu. In the girl's view, it was Yu who argued with Boss Shui and saved her life. Yu smiled and took the candy, which was probably expired, and rubbed the girl's head. Ye Fanyan, who was sitting next to Jingjing, was thinking deeply. Since Boss Shui and the others were born in Qingyang base, they left you alone in the battle. They may have ulterior motives. Ye Fanyan frowned and reminded Yu intentionally. After arriving at Qingyang base, you must hide your identity and don't let others know. The identity mentioned by Ye Fanyan was a double entendre. On the surface, he was talking about Yu's identity as a scientific research expert, but in fact, he was worried that the latter's identity as Ba Wangguya would be exposed. Ba Wangguya killed countless Tianjiao seeds of human bases in the god's domain. If his identity was recognized by those bases, he would definitely retaliate at all costs. The girl Jingjing showed an ambiguous attitude on her face, savoring it on the side. Sister Fanyan really cares about Brother Chu. Everyone could hear the teasing meaning in Jingjing's mouth, even Ye Fanyan's cheeks flushed. He stretched out his hand and tugged at the girl's delicate face. You are the only girl with so many tricks. The girl was so coquettish that her ponytail shook continuously. Xiao Yunyi heard the play behind him, and a flash of anger flashed in his eyes, but he quickly covered it up. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly jumped out of the forest in front, and it could be vaguely seen that it was a beast. It made a strange cry and rushed towards the steel-armored off-road vehicle where everyone was. Yao Yuan in the driver's seat did not change his expression, but he stepped on the accelerator hard, and the dull sound of flesh collision sounded. The steel beast-like off-road heavy vehicle directly rolled over the body of the beast. As the blood flew, a large piece of sticky red blood splashed on the car body. Driving at high speed along the mountain road, the blood-stained steel-armored vehicle passed all the way. Gradually, some scattered low houses could be seen on both sides. A village built in the mountains and forests appeared before everyone. But the strange thing is that as everyone rushed along the village path, there was no trace of any zombie monster. Everyone, be careful, something is wrong here. Yao Yuan and Xiao Yunyi looked at each other, and the former carefully parked the off-road vehicle in a corner of the roadside. Everyone got out of the car warily, and the twin-tailed girl with perceptive powers closed her eyes. After a long time, Jingjing opened her eyes and shook her head at everyone. It's strange. There seems to be no aura fluctuations of living things here. After hearing what Jingjing said, everyone felt relieved, but doubts arose again in their hearts. This village is surrounded by mountains and rivers. Even if it is sparsely populated, there won't be even a single wild animal, right? At this time, Yao Yuan seemed to have discovered something. He bent down, stretched out his fingers and touched the sticky ground. This looks like blood. Everyone entered the village along the path, and the scene in front of them shocked them to death. I saw that the entire dilapidated village was stained with blood, and the damp ground was covered with corpses that had not yet decomposed. These corpses are basically some mutated forest beasts, and occasionally the remains of a few zombies wearing cloth can be found among them. Looking around, the entire village seems to be piled up with corpses, dead and empty, which makes people feel scary and a bit weird at the same time. Yao Yuan and others stepped forward to investigate and came to a surprising conclusion. These zombies and beasts were all killed by humans. Yao Yuan pointed to a relatively intact bison carcass, with a bullet wound clearly penetrating the cow's head. It shouldn't take more than 3 days for these monsters to die. Zhuang Qiang walked over the pile of corpses. There are at least hundreds of mutated creature corpses here. These monsters can be killed instantly in a short period of time. The number of people should be over 100. Obviously, a large human team passed through this place not long ago and killed all the zombie beasts here. Yao Yuan pointed to a narrow path at the entrance of the village, where there were several deep ruts made by tires, with a deep look. This direction. The destination of this group of people is also Qingyang Base. Mu Qiu lowered his head and looked at the broken beast corpses around him. Many of the corpses were killed by one blow. The methods were clean and neat, and his strength was impressive. Combined with Xue Xiaokang's previous description, the purpose of these people is somewhat intriguing. Xiao Yunyi and others focused their gazes, and they all saw the complicated look in the other person's eyes. Obviously, the Qingyang base they were going to was encountering something unexpected at the moment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 434. In the south-central part of the southern border, there stands a tall and majestic human base. In the vast forests of southern Xinjiang, there are groups of wild beasts and fierce beasts, and large human settlements are rare. The outer wall of the base is made entirely of dense soil blocks. The reinforced earth wall is a green-brown color, which forms a sharp contrast with the surrounding rainforest land. Just above the solid and thick wall, a line of human troops holding guns are guarding against possible threats from afar. These soldiers are dressed in military uniforms, with resolute faces and bright eyes. At first glance, they are professional troops who have undergone rigorous training. Suddenly, a heavy sound of footsteps came from the other side of the reinforced earth wall. When this figure passed by the soldiers on guard, these soldiers with live ammunition all bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Captain." "Yes." A man wearing gloves and with a resolute face nodded and said in a low voice, "What's the situation at the beast nest?" The soldier next to him replied, "At present, there is no sign of the beast nest going berserk." The square-faced man in military uniform frowned slightly and looked at the sky behind the base. Half of the sky seemed to be covered with a layer of haze. After a slight hesitation, the resolute man in military uniform was about to say something, but a shout came from the wall in the distance. The man in military uniform's face changed slightly, and his pace quickened. "Is there any abnormal movement in the beast nest?" After saying that, the man in military uniform looked down. In the depths of the distant mountains and forests, a cross-country vehicle covered with steel armor suddenly appeared. The solid body of the vehicle was stained with blood, like a ferocious beast with its fangs bared for hunting. The soldier beside him exclaimed, "Yes, is it the reinforcements coming to support us?" The square-faced man in military uniform looked around intently. He found that only this chariot was rushing towards their base. "No, there is something wrong with these people." The man in military uniform had a gleam of light in his eyes, and he jumped directly from the wall that was more than 10 meters high. There was a loud bang, and the earth cried out under the violent impact. The fine sand under his feet turned into a solid rock wall in an instant, blocking the road ahead of the off-road chariot that was dozens of meters away. The off-road chariot that was galloping like a steel beast obviously did not expect a stone wall to suddenly appear in front of it. The driver suddenly braked and dragged a deep car mark on the ground. The man in military uniform had a sharp gaze and said in a deep voice, "I am Li Yonggang, the leader of the 3rd Regiment of Qingyang Base." "Who are you?" After a moment of silence, several figures got off the off-road vehicle that was forced to stop. Xiao Yunyi, who was wearing a suit and handsome, walked in front and said, "We are awakeners from Yongxiao City in Baiziao Domain." Yongxiao City. Li Yonggang still did not let down his guard and counted the figures that got off the car. "Do you have any evidence?" Xiao Yunyi stretched out the ring on his finger. The ring, which emitted a dim light, flashed with mist, and a Xiao word was engraved on it. Xiao family of Yongxiao City, Xiao Yunyi. The expression on Li Yonggang's face slowed down a little, and he clasped his fists and said, "I'm sorry, but Li remembers that the reinforcements from Yongxiao City had arrived a few days ago." Reinforcements. Xiao Yunyi and others looked at each other, and they didn't understand what Li Yonggang meant. Xiao Yunyi stepped forward and explained the purpose of everyone's visit. After hearing Xiao Yunyi's explanation, Li Yonggang's expression gradually became a little strange. He turned his head to look at the team members in front of him, all of whom had a little fatigue on their faces and different degrees of injuries on their bodies. "This is not a place to talk, everyone, please follow me in first." Li Yonggang looked behind him, and the soldiers on the wall understood and immediately opened the heavy and solid door of the base. Seeing this, everyone followed Li Yonggang into this large base standing in the hinterland of southern Xinjiang. Unlike cities in other regions, southern Xinjiang is mostly low-rise wooden buildings due to climate and terrain. The buildings in the entire Qingyang base are staggered and the vegetation is lush. When everyone walked in, they thought they had come to a gathering tribe of ethnic minorities. As they went deeper into the base, some human survivors in different clothes walked by from time to time on both sides, in a hurry. Judging from the physical description of these people, this base has developed quite well in the end times. At least it is much better than those hungry wanderers in the ruins of the city. "Captain Li, I wonder if the leader of your base, Lu Jinchang, is still safe. I haven't seen Uncle Lu for a long time." Xiao Yunyi thought that his Xiao family and the Lu family had been friends for generations, so he was more confident after entering the Qingyang base. He approached Li Yonggang and tried to get close to him. Hearing Xiao Yunyi suddenly mention the leader of the base, Li Yonggang's face suddenly became a little strange, but quickly returned to normal. "General Lu is fine, as for your request. The situation in Qingyang base is a bit special now, I'm afraid we have to ask General Li for instructions." Li Yonggang seemed unwilling to say more, and he kept a straight face, just leading everyone to the depths of the base. Yafanyan and others looked around, and there were well-equipped patrol soldiers walking by the road from time to time, in an orderly manner. Only Mu Qiu, who was walking at the back of the team and wearing a prajna mask, looked thoughtfully at the leader Li Yonggang. On the wrist that the latter inadvertently exposed, he was wearing a mechanical bracelet similar to Xue Shaokan's mechanical collar. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 435. As everyone followed Li Yonggang deeper, the flow of people around them gradually became denser. Some survivors were still wearing ethnic minority costumes, and their faces did not have the numbness and despair of the survivors in other bases. On the contrary, the survivors walking on both sides looked tired, but their faces showed a state of abundance. In the fields passing by, you can still see some busy figures wearing straw raincoats and hats. Thanks to the special climate and terrain of southern Xinjiang, these survivors can be self-sufficient in the fields of the base. Such scenes are quite rare in the end of the world. Xiao Yunyi and others looked around, and the scene in Qingyang base was obviously very different from what they expected. Looking at Li Yonggang's back, he was obviously not going to say anything more to them. Just when Xiao Yunyi couldn't bear it and planned to continue chatting with Li Yonggang, a rough voice suddenly came from a distance. "Isn't this Miss Fanyan? Long time no see." Everyone turned around and saw a team of dozens of people walking towards them from the distant woods. This group of people were all big and strong men, and their clothes were different from those of the survivors of Qingyang base. The leader was a bald man with stubble on his face, dark skin, and wearing a khaki vest. The bald man had a bright smile on his face and walked towards Yefanyan and others with his men. Yefanyan turned around and looked surprised the moment she saw the bald man. "She-Potion? How come you are here?" She-Potion strode to Yefanyan and laughed. "Since we parted in the divine realm, I haven't seen the peerless Fengling sword princess for a long time. I didn't expect that Miss Fanyan in the real world is still so beautiful." The bald man was very good at talking. He turned his head and shouted to his men behind him. "Miss Fanyan is the daughter of Lord Ye of Yungziao City. She helped me a lot in the catastrophe of the divine realm. Everyone, please meet Miss Ye." As soon as the words fell, the men behind him bowed and saluted at the same time. "Meet Miss Ye." The strong voice spread out, instantly attracting strange looks from the people around. At first glance, I thought it was a gangster gang. Yefanyan and others were also frightened by the bald man's move and stood there in a daze. On the side, Muqiu, who was wearing a prajna mask, had a gleam in his eyes when he saw the bald man. He actually recognized him. This bald man named She-Potion was also one of the hundreds of thousands of players trapped in the God Realm world. Muqiu vaguely remembered that this man was a high-end player ranked at the top of the God Realm list, and he was also a human genius in a large base in the real world. After Muqiu killed the two-headed giant python as Guya and showed his power, She-Potion was so excited that he wanted to swear brotherhood with Muqiu. At this time, the bald man turned his head, as if he had just seen Xiao Yunyi. "Isn't this Xiao, the young master?" Putting his arm around Xiao Yunyi's shoulders like a familiar person, the bald man grinned and said, "Why are you still dressed like a sissy? It seems to me that it's better to train your muscles." Xiao Yunyi's eyes flashed with a trace of imperceptible anger, and then a far-fetched smile appeared on his face. It can be seen that even Xiao Yunyi was unwilling to easily provoke this rough man in front of him. But what puzzled them was how She-Potion appeared in Qingyang base. Yefanyan asked directly, "Why did you come to Qingyang base?" The bald man was slightly stunned, and then grinned. "Miss Fanyan is really a joke. Didn't we come here because we received the distress signal from Qingyang base? My giant rock fortress is a small place. We can't build high-tech equipment such as a portal. We can only rely on manpower to rush here. Yesterday. Ask for help." After listening to She-Potion's words, Yefanyan and others all looked very strange. She-Potion saw everyone's behavior and realized something was wrong. "Don't you know? Qingyang base sent a distress signal to all major bases a few days ago, saying that it would be attacked by a beast tide soon, so it requested all major bases to send troops to rescue. Not only my giant rock fortress, but also many bases such as Baiziao Domain and Ziji Domain have sent reinforcements. After all, the human race is weak in the end of the world, and it is only right for major bases to help each other." Until then, everyone's eyes showed horror, and they understood why Li Yunggang's reaction was so strange. Qingyang base is currently in trouble, and everyone came to ask for help at this time. Turning to look at Li Yunggang, the latter had to smile bitterly. "It is difficult for Li to explain this for a while, so you should follow me to see General Lu first." Xiao Yunyi and others had to nod their heads. At this point, they could only figure out the situation before making plans. The bald man She-Potion also took the opportunity to follow with his men. At a glance, there were dozens of muscular men behind the team. People who didn't know would think it was a gang. She-Potion chatted with Yefanyan and others as if he was familiar with them. When he looked at Muqiu wearing a prajna mask, She-Potion was slightly stunned. "Have we met this little brother before?" For some reason, the black-robed figure in front of him always made him feel familiar. A clear voice came from under the mask, "You may have recognized the wrong person." Brushing shoulders with the masked man, She-Pokong touched the back of his head. Strange. After a while, Li Yonggang led everyone to a Tulu located behind the base. The Tulu is surrounded by walls made of wood and bamboo, covering a large area, with obvious local characteristics. As soon as she walked to the gatehouse, Jingjing suddenly opened her eyes. Inside, there are a lot of very powerful aura fluctuations. Everyone's heart was immediately startled. Jingjing's perception has never been wrong. Sure enough, as soon as they entered the wide cylindrical Tulu, the scene in front of them made everyone look horrified. People. The wide courtyard was actually full of humans in different clothes. Almost at the moment when everyone stepped into the courtyard, countless sharp eyes had gathered. Even an S-level awakener like Xiao Yunyi couldn't help but tremble in the face of so many eyes. A sense of palpitations lingered in my heart. There were more than a dozen S-level awakeners in the open. Everyone was planning to walk past this probing gaze, but suddenly a surprised voice came over. Big young master. Xiao Yunyi looked up suddenly, and saw a skinny man standing not far away, also with a look of astonishment. Wang Wu. Why are you here? The skinny man called Wang Wu scratched his head. Not long after the big young master disappeared, the master was furious and sent people to turn the nearby city ruins upside down, but couldn't find the young master. Then the base received a distress signal from the Qingyang base, and the master sent the second young master to bring us here for reinforcement. Second young master. When Xiao Yunyi heard Wang Wu mention the name of the second young master, his face changed. Just then, a slightly happy voice came from behind Wang Wu. Big brother, I didn't expect to see you here. A handsome man in light armor walked out of the crowd with a smile on his face, and his face was actually somewhat similar to Xiao Yunyi. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 436. The moment they saw the lightly armored man, the people behind Xiao Yunyi were also surprised. It's Xiao Yuntian, he was also sent to Qingyang base. But I heard that the eldest and second young masters of the Xiao family are not. Yao Yuan and others were whispering in the back. It turned out that this was the reinforcement from Yungxiao city that Li Yonggang had mentioned before. The handsome man in light armor had a happy smile on his face, as if he was very grateful for this reunion. Until he saw Ye Fanyan standing behind Xiao Yunyi, he smiled unexpectedly. Fanyan is here too? City Lord Ye has been looking for you for a long time. Ye Fanyan nodded and said. Long time no see, Yuntian. Haha, how come brother Yuntian forgot about me, old Shi? The bald strong man Shi Potion laughed and walked up to Xiao Yuntian's neck in a familiar manner. In the crowd, Mu Qiu, who was wearing a mask, looked at Xiao Yuntian, who was wearing light armor, with some surprise. He didn't expect that he would meet so many acquaintances in this Qingyang base. This Xiao Yuntian was also a human genius who had experienced the catastrophe of the God Realm. He also established the third-ranked Cloud City Guild in the God Realm world, and was in the limelight for a while. Xiao Yunyi noticed the difference between Shi Potion's attitude towards himself and Xiao Yuntian, and felt unhappy. After a few words with Shi Potion, Xiao Yuntian turned to look at Xiao Yunyi and asked. Brother, what happened, why? He turned his head and looked at the few people behind Xiao Yunyi, and said in surprise. Why are there only a few people left? Xiao Yuntian's words completely hit the pain point in Xiao Yunyi's heart. Under his leadership, the team of dozens of high-level awakeners was almost wiped out, and he couldn't explain it to anyone even after returning. Xiao Yunyi sneered, you probably wish I would never come back, right? After saying that, he walked forward without saying anything, leaving everyone looking at each other in bewilderment. Some of the awakened people watching around also recognized the identities of the two people, and they talked about it. I have heard that the two sons of the Xiao family in Yongxiao City have different personalities. Today, I see that it is true. Just then, a slightly heavy sound of footsteps came from the bamboo building not far away. There were at least thousands of awakened people with different strengths present, and the sound of discussion was quite noisy. But this sound of footsteps was clearly heard by everyone. I saw a kind old man with a scepter in his hand, slowly walking down from the bamboo carving attic. The old man was wearing a standard military uniform, and his black hair did not show any signs of old age. As soon as the old man walked down, Li Yonggang, who had led Mu Qiu and others here, immediately summoned his subordinates to stand still and guard beside the man. It's Lu Jinchang, the leader of Qingyang base. When this kind old man with extraordinary demeanor stood on the platform, all the awakened people in the audience stopped making noise and the scene was silent for a while. They knew that the seemingly ordinary kind old man in front of them was the supreme leader of the entire Qingyang base, the destructive awakened person known as Lian Kenguyu, Lu Jinchang. Lu Jinchang looked at the many awakened people from different bases who almost filled the wide courtyard, with a gentle smile on his face. Thank you all for reinforcing my Qingyang base. Lu, on behalf of all the human race in Qingyang base, thanks you all. After that, he bowed slightly to the people in the audience without caring about his identity, causing exclamations from the audience. They had heard that General Lu of Qingyang base was polite and courteous, and was highly respected by the human race in the end times. Today, they saw that he was even more so. Lu Jinchang raised his head, like a gentle and noble gentleman. I believe you all already know the reason for calling everyone together this time. Lu Jinchang raised his head, looked at the sky in the distance of the base, and sighed. Not long ago, an inexplicable beast tide suddenly broke out in the southeast of Qingyang base. The energy was so powerful that even Lu felt extremely frightened. I immediately sent people to investigate, but without exception, everyone who went to investigate the situation died. As he said that, a light curtain fell from the attic, playing a very blurry video. The video seemed to be shot in a secret jungle, with a tricky angle and a hidden location. But in the darkness below, countless scarlet bloodthirsty eyes were lurking in the depths of the forest. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed through the forest, blood flashed, and a man's scream came. The camera began to shake violently, and the fierce roars of beasts kept coming from all around. According to the last video sent back by the explorer, in the depths of the 10,000 beasts nest in the southeast, there are more than a dozen S-level auras guarding there. Lu Jinchang narrowed his eyes and his face became a little solemn. There are even some destructive beasts among them. I suspect, a beast king that is about to surpass the destructive level was born among these mutant beasts. As soon as the voice fell, Lu Jinchang's words immediately caused an uproar in the audience. No one expected that what was originally just an ordinary beast tide crisis would actually lead to such a powerful existence as the Beast King. In order to clear the obstacles, this Beast King has launched several tentative attacks on my Qingyang base in recent days, Tianlai novel network. If we let this Beast King grow, my Qingyang base will fall under the iron hoof of the army of beasts in a few years, which will be a huge disaster for my entire human race. When Lu Jinchang said this, everyone present understood the seriousness of the matter. Before, the East Sky region was conquered by the Eternal Night Lord and the Eternal Night Royal family. If my southern border region is also occupied by this Beast King, then my entire human race will fall into an irreversible disadvantage and completely become an eliminated person in this doomsday. In the crowd, Mu Qiu, who was wearing a ferocious ghost face, heard Lu Jinchang's words, but his eyes lit up. Beast King. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 437. There is the corpse king in front of us, and there is the beast king in the back. This really doesn't leave any way for us humans to survive. If a beast king is really born, wouldn't the entire southern border be in danger? Thousands of awakened people from different bases gathered together and discussed each other. In front of the Beast King, whose strength exceeded the destruction level, they were as insignificant as ants. At this time, a long-haired man walked out of the crowd, raised his hands to Lu Jinchang and said, "General Lu, has your base found any other information about this Beast King, so that we can have a way to deal with it?" Having said that, some of them have already begun to give up and regret having rashly joined this rescue operation. Lu Jinchang held the scepter and slowly shook his head. That Beast King probably hasn't become a thing yet, otherwise our Qingyang base would have been reduced to ruins. Hearing this, everyone's heart slowed down a little. If there were no existence beyond the level of destruction, then everything would be easy to say. If the Beast King hidden in the nest of beasts really transcends destruction, we may have no choice but to invite the God of Thunder from the West Extreme region to compete with him. The God of Thunder in the West Extreme region, who single-handedly protects hundreds of thousands of people. When the name Thunder God was mentioned, everyone's faces suddenly showed awe. There is no doubt that this Thunder God has a high status in everyone's hearts. Lu Jinchang saw that the faces of everyone below were covered with a layer of gloom, and suddenly laughed and said, "Of course, the situation has not reached such a serious level at present. With our strength, we are not without the power to fight, so there is no need for you to worry unfounded. Lu would also like to thank you all for standing up during the crisis in southern Xinjiang. The tens of millions of people in southern Xinjiang will definitely remember it." Having said that, some awakened people in the audience secretly cursed the old fox. Qingyang base did not reveal the Beast King when it issued a request for help. They originally thought that this was just an ordinary beast invasion, so many people were kept in the dark and rushed here. They thought it was an experience with rich rewards. If Lu Jinchang had mentioned the Beast King in advance, at least 40% of them would have disappeared. Some of them came here through expensive space portals, and some even came here forcefully across hundreds of kilometers. Now that things have come to this, if we go back temporarily, the price we have to pay is not just a simple loss of face. As if he saw the confusion on everyone's faces, Lu Jinchang smiled and said, "After everything is over, the resources that Qingyang base originally promised to you will be doubled. The crystal nuclei collected during the whole process belong to everyone, and Qingyang base will not interfere in the slightest." Lu Jinchang's words were obviously soothing, and everyone's expressions softened a little. The people who came here today were the main force of awakened people who came from major bases for reinforcements, and Lu Jinchang only wanted to reveal the birth of the Beast King to these awakened people in advance. Among the crowd, Mu Qiu, who was wearing a crimson ferocious mask, was lost in thought. These awakened people from various forces were dressed in different styles, and many of them wore even weirder clothes than Mu Qiu, so Mu Qiu did not attract attention. Unlike others, Mu Qiu looked around. Most of the awakened people here were elites from major bases, and their strength was all above B level. He was thinking whether he should devour all these people here. This would be a good meal. After thinking for a moment, Mu Qiu shook her head again. The situation in the southern territory is still unclear, the strength of the Beast King is not yet known, and his strength has not yet been fully restored. Let's let these cannon fodder go through the muddy waters first. Are you okay? Yefanyan on the side noticed Mu Qiu's strange behavior and pulled the corner of the latter's clothes with concern in his eyes. In her opinion, she thought Mu Qiu was nervous because she had met so many old acquaintances in the god's domain and was afraid of being recognized. Speaking of which, Yefanyan was shocked to find that many of the awakened people who came to assist Qingyang base this time were familiar faces they had seen in God's domain. Most of them were forces that Mu Qiu had directly or indirectly offended. If this group of people found out that the overlord Guye they hated so much was right in front of them, he was just an unarmed ordinary person. Yefanyan could imagine what terrible things the latter would encounter. Even the city of clouds where she is located will never be able to protect Mu Qiu from so many bases. Mu Qiu slowly shook her head and said in a joking tone, It's okay, I'm still thinking about what to eat later. This turned into a forced smile in Yefanyan's eyes. She bit her lower lip, and the concern in her eyes became even stronger. All of this was seen by Xiao Yunyi, who was not far away. He was already unhappy with Xiao Yuntian's appearance and became even more annoyed, and his face turned livid. After a while, Lu Jinchang finished speaking some polite words before calling on the awakened ones gathered in the courtyard to go back and rest. The expressions on the faces of these awakened ones are extremely complex and full of thoughts. The news just from Lu Jinchang was extremely shocking. They knew that after returning, they would have to start some discussions with their subordinates. When all the awakened people in the courtyard dispersed, Li Yonggang, who had brought Mu Qiu and others here before, came over again. He looked at Xiao Yunyi and the others and said, "Everyone, General Lu wants to meet you." The few people looked at each other and saw the bitterness in each other's eyes. They knew that they really didn't come at the right time this time. Xiao Yuntian signaled to the men in Yongxiao City with his eyes, and followed Mu Qiu and the others. When Li Yonggang led everyone into the attic of the Earth building. Pushing open the door, a kind old man holding a scepter was sitting on a rattan chair. Lu Jinchang called everyone alone, with a kind smile on his face, not showing any old age. "Xiao Shinfu, we haven't seen each other for a while since we parted in Baiziao. I wonder if brother Xiao is doing well." Xiao Yunyi bowed slightly. Father often mentions Uncle Xiao. After the two exchanged greetings, Xiao Yunyi also revealed their experiences and the purpose of this trip. As if to cover up his mistakes, Xiao Yunyi described the shocking battle at Wangcheng Base in great detail. The battle was so fierce that the sky was dark and the space was shattered. It was just like a great battle in the ancient times, and all the people and ghosts cried. The entire Wangcheng Base was razed to the ground. Lu Jinchang's face became solemn when he heard Xiao Yunyi's description. If it is as Xiao Xiangzi said, the only one who can cause such destruction in Dongxiao domain is the Corpse King who created the Eternal Night evil clan and dominated the Dongxiao domain, the Lord of Eternal Night. The Lord of Eternal Night? As soon as these words came out, the whole audience fell into a moment of silence. There is no doubt that in the dawn battle witnessed by millions of humans, the pressure brought by the Lord of Eternal Night to the human race was too great. I just don't know what kind of existence can compete with the Lord of Eternal Night. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 438. Lu Jinchang held his scepter and murmured to himself, with a look of confusion on his face. But Xiao Yunyi and the others in front of him were frightened to death, and their faces turned pale. They never imagined that the person fighting above their heads that day was actually the Lord of Eternal Night who dominated the Eastern Sky territory. What's even more miraculous is that they still survived in the hands of the Lord of Eternal Night. The Lord of Eternal Night. Yefanyan opened her cherry lips lightly, recalling in her mind the red figure that day on the top of the Jade Sea, fighting against thousands of troops. Xiao Yuntian behind him also heard the deeds of Xiao Yunyi and others, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. No wonder Xiao Yunyi and others lost contact with each other because they encountered the terrifying existence from the East Sky territory. The Lord of Eternal Night has achieved great success, and most of the Eastern Sky territory has fallen under him. He is no longer just as simple as the Corpse King. Lu Jinchang sighed and said with emotion, "If this Beast King in southern Xinjiang is allowed to be born again, then our human race will never be able to succeed." The corner of Xiao Yunyi's mouth twitched. Before he could recover from the news just now, he looked at Lu Jinchang and said, "Uncle Lu, don't worry. Our human race has countless geniuses. They will grow up in a few years. By then, these heretical monsters will be killed." Lu Jinchang smiled and did not intend to say more on this topic, and continued, "I already know the origins of Xiao Shi's nephew and his party. Our Qingyang base did entrust the Zilan base to build a portal connecting the Baiziao territory. It's just that now the portal's energy has been exhausted in order to welcome the reinforcements from the northern sky region. If it wants to restart, it needs to inject new space energy. Lu Jinchang looked at Xiao Yunyi and others with apologetic eyes. Let's do this. If the space crystal core can be found in the next battle, I will immediately send nephew Xiao Shi and his party away from southern Xinjiang. Xiao Yunyi and others' faces were ashen. Now that things have come to this, how can they request to leave if the Qingyang base cannot protect itself? Xiao Yunyi coughed lightly, with a solemn expression on his handsome face, and said with awe and dignity. Uncle Lu, what are you talking about? Since the Qingyang base is in trouble and we are fellow human beings, we, Yongxiao City, will definitely do our best to help. Lu Jinchang held the scepter and laughed with satisfaction. Our human race has outstanding people like Xiao Shini, why should we be unhappy? Nephew Xiao Shi must be exhausted physically and mentally from traveling all the way. Then, Lu Jinchang looked at Li Yonggang in military uniform. I will treat my nephew Xiao Shi and his companions with the highest etiquette in southern Xinjiang. Xiao Yunyi could only smile bitterly and thank Lu Jinchang for his kindness, but in fact, he was already complaining secretly in his heart. Li Yonggang immediately took the order and left the attic with Xiao Yunyi and others. Before leaving, Mu Qiu, who was wearing a mask, turned her head and glanced deeply at Lu Jinchang, who was sitting on the wicker chair with a charitable smile on his face. As the wooden door slowly closed, the light outside gradually dissipated along the cracks in the door. The smile on Lu Jinchang's face instantly faded, and turned into an extremely solemn and gloomy one. In the East Sky territory, there is a desolate and remote city ruins. Boundless black shadow shrouded the abandoned city, and bright red blood was splashed in every corner of the ruins. Suddenly, a burst of heart-chilling laughter came from the ruins. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became cold, and black figures were seen standing in every corner of the ruins. Their blood-red pupils were filled with bloodthirsty and evil thoughts, and the dirty blood stains on their bodies gave them a bloody coat. These black figures have different appearances and shapes. The only thing that remains unchanged is their blue-black skin and scarlet bloodthirsty pupils. At this moment, space cracks suddenly burst out in the surrounding space, and the spreading space cracks gradually formed a light gate. A white figure poked out of the crack in space like a ghost, with an indifferent expression as if it looked down upon life and death. At the moment when this white figure appeared, all the shadow creatures around them stopped making noise. They put away the evil smiles on their faces and said respectfully, "Grown-ups." Although the voices sound a little confusing and lame, the words spoken by these black creatures are human languages. And the white figure was surrounded by many Yanjai tribesmen. He is the general of the Yanjai dynasty who is feared by countless humans, and the world-famous commander of the 18 Yu Yun cavalry. White Death Ji Yufeng. Ji Yufeng nodded slightly and suddenly turned around. I saw the sky in front of me suddenly swept by sand, and a sandstorm raged. Among the overflowing yellow salon scrolls, a thick figure slowly walked out on the gravel in the sky. It was a man wearing bronze armor, with cracks appearing on his withered face, and his face was solemn and majestic. Still not found. Zhang Yuan stepped out of the yellow sand and looked at Ji Yufeng Deo. Ji Yufeng slowly shook his head, and a curtain of light flashed under the lens. Zhang Yuan frowned and said, I have searched almost the entire Dongxiao territory, but I still haven't found any trace of you. He won't die. Ji Yufeng was determined and set his sights on the distant sky. Suddenly, a burst of screams from the Yanjai tribe came from behind. Ji Yufeng looked back and saw a dark vortex suddenly appearing in the distant sky. A miserable figure covered in scars rolled out of the black vortex. The man was wearing a torn leather jacket, his right arm was missing, and there were still mottled blood on his body. It was hard to imagine what happened to this man. The man covered his broken right arm and staggered to his feet. At this moment, countless figures surrounded him. Ji Yufeng and Zhang Yuan exuded a suffocating strong fluctuation, and their eyes were cold with undisguised murderous intent. "Who is it?" The tone was cold and direct, as if the majestic murderous aura would drown him in the next second. Xue Xiaokong looked horrified, and with trembling arms, he raised a black token tightly held in his hand. The token was surrounded by black flames, and a blood-red pupil in the center exuded boundless power, overlooking all living beings. Almost at the moment the token was revealed, countless Yanjai people on the surrounding streets immediately felt a tremor from the soul, bowed and knelt, and looked respectful. Ji Yufeng and Zhang Yuan were even more shocked. The former stared at Xue Xiaokong's panicked face and said coldly, "Where is he?" Xue Xiaokong, who had just escaped from the shadow world, was almost collapsed by the destructive pressure. He said hurriedly, Southern Xinjiang, he is in the southern Xinjiang." Ji Yufeng's pupils flashed a cold light. Southern Xinjiang. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 439. At night, the entire Qingyang Bay seemed to be covered with a hazy veil. The survivors living here seem to have gradually faded away from the shadow of technology, and their lives have returned to their most primitive appearance. Wooden houses and bamboo buildings with regional style are located among the lawns and mountains, and bonfires are lit on both sides of the path surrounded by flowers and plants. Perhaps compared to Qingyang Base, this place is more suitable to be called Qingyang Village. Tianlai Novel Network. In a bamboo hut near the mountain, Mu Chiu's slender figure was lying on a specially made wooden bed with a rattan chair. He crossed his legs leisurely and played with the crimson ferocious mask with his right hand, with a smile on his lips. Interesting. Even Mu Chiu had never expected that he would meet so many old acquaintances in this small Qingyang base. In the conversation with Ye Fanyan and others, it seemed that in addition to Shi Potion and Xiao Yuntian, there were many players who had experienced the catastrophe of the divine realm. These people are the seeds of genius cultivated by major bases with all their resources, and they are deliberately released to hone themselves in the apocalypse. Of course, Mu Chiu had no impression of these people. A burst of purple light suddenly bloomed from his chest, and a box inlaid with blood pupils emerged. Wisps of black energy were released from the box, intertwined with the flames rising from Mu Chiu's fingertips. Meow. A naive black cat emerged surrounded by layers of black flames, with streaks of black energy still burning at its tail. The black cat floated in the air to Mu Chiu's side, stretched out its tongue and gently licked the side of Mu Chiu's face. Mu Chiu smiled and rubbed the black cat's head. "Can't you hold it in any longer?" Looking at the well-behaved black cat in her hand, Mu Chiu murmured. Beast King. He really wanted to see how majestic this king of ferocious beasts was who could stand out among the many savage beasts in southern Xinjiang. And the nest of beasts. The black cat's cheek rubbed against Mu Chiu's palm affectionately, and a glint flashed in the latter's eyes. If he remembered correctly, the check-in location arranged by the system this time was deep in the hinterland of the Southern Territory, the nest of beasts. With so many people accompanying me, it seems that my trip to southern Xinjiang will not be too lonely. Mu Chiu's eyes narrowed, and a spring breeze-like smile appeared on his face. Suddenly, as if she sensed something, Mu Chiu slowly turned her head and looked out the window. Coming so soon. In another wooden house not far from Mu Chiu's place, two slender bodies were lying on a large bed. The little girl Jing Jing rolled around on the bed. It had been a long time since she had rested on such a comfortable bed. Sister Fanyan, why do you think that Xiao Yuntian is here too? Jing Jing pouted her mouth and turned her head to look at Ye Fanyan beside her. She originally had a good impression of Xiao Yuntian, but after the catastrophe in the divine realm, her good impression of Xiao Yuntian disappeared. Back then, 70,000 players in Bajing Cave besieged Yefanyan and Muqiu at the same time in order to compete for the Apocalypse Key. At the critical moment, Xiao Yuntian, as the president, refused to assist Yefanyan and chose to watch the fire from the other side to avoid his sharp edge. Since then, the favorability of the second young master of the Xiao family in the heart of the little girl Jingjing has plummeted, and he is no longer disliked. Also, Xiao Yunyi is not a good guy. He is just mediocre. Sister Fanyan, you should choose Brother Qiu. After saying that, the girl hurriedly picked up the pillow on the side to protect her little head. Yefanyan was both angry and happy. He stepped forward and scratched the girl's nose, and chuckled. You should pay more attention to yourself, you quirky little girl. The two best friends were fighting on the bed for a while, and it took a while before they calmed down. Jingjing stopped playing around and became a little worried. Sister Fanyan, can we really return to the base safely this time? Thinking of the king of beasts that Lu Jinchang said during the day, the little girl couldn't help but tremble in her heart, just like a frightened little rabbit. Feeling the girl's worry, Yefanyan also frowned slightly and said hesitantly. This time, hundreds of awakened people came to our city of clouds alone. Other bases only have a lot more than us. I heard that there are several destruction-level powerhouses coming to take charge, so there shouldn't be any problems. Generally speaking, the destruction-level powerhouses are the top beings who guard one's base and will not leave their own base easily. The news of the birth of the Beast King this time can actually force one side of the destruction-level powerhouse to leave the base. It seems that the human race really does not dare to neglect it. The precedent of the Lord of Eternal Night is still vivid in our minds, and the human race can no longer watch another Lord of Eternal Night appear. Thinking of this gathering of many human races, Yefanyan couldn't help but remind the girl next to him. You must remember not to expose Qiu Mu's identity, otherwise he will really be in danger. Among the forces that came to assist the Qingyang base, there were many victims of the catastrophe in the divine domain. Some bases are even still exploring the true identity of Overlord Guy. If they knew that the Overlord Guye they were looking for was actually an ordinary person with no power to restrain a chicken, it would definitely lead to crazy revenge from these forces. Jingjing nodded seriously, but whispered behind her back. You care about someone so much, and yet you say you don't like her. You girl. Yefanyan raised the pillow in her hand and was about to explode. But suddenly, a loud horn sounded in her ears, deafening, like the sound of war drums. What is going on? Not good. Yefanyan seemed to have sensed something, with a flash of surprise in her eyes, and hurriedly pulled the girl beside her and rushed out of the house. The humans in the entire base were awakened by the sudden horn sound, and they filed out from the wooden houses and tile houses in all directions. What's going on? What happened? The awakened people who came to reinforce from other bases didn't understand, and looked at the Qingyang base where the bonfire spread in astonishment. In a wooden house, Xiao Yunyi, with an angry face, slammed the door and hugged Xiaoman. The two were disheveled, looking like a good thing was disturbed. However, some of the natives of the Qingyang base, especially those ordinary survivors, all rushed out of the house, with worried and anxious faces. I saw several speed-type awakeners holding torches, walking through the streets, and blowing horns with their other hands, shouting, "Beasts, beast tide raid." Instantly, all the awakeners with impatient faces immediately panicked. What, beasts, beast tide? Why at this time? At this moment, every corner of the Qingyang base was in a boiling state. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 440. Under the night, the Qingyang base seemed to be shrouded in a layer of dark clouds, which was strange and deep. On top of the wall built of thick earth, stood rows of soldiers with loaded guns and solemn expressions to guard them. Roar! Suddenly, there was a suffocating roar of beasts on the distant horizon. The ear-splitting roar of the beast resounded through the sky, and then groups of huge figures emerged from the mountain forest, rushing towards the Qingyang base like a wave. It's a beast. Countless huge, ferocious beasts rushed from the deep and dense forest far away. A pair of bloodthirsty eyes are full of primitive animality and desire to kill, and the huge body contains an extremely suppressed and ferocious aura. On the city wall, the soldiers who saw the scene couldn't help but swallow their saliva, and their expressions were frozen. The earth trembled under the trampling of countless pairs of footsteps, which also foreshadowed the raging terror of the beasts in front of them. Above the city wall, Li Yonggang stood at the front and stared blankly at the scene in front of him. Until a certain moment, his eyes flashed, his tone was firm, and he gave an order. Suppressive fire. In an instant, the machine guns and cannons that had been fixed above the wall were activated instantly. The bursting gun barrel was filled with gunpowder smoke, and countless artillery bullets brought up large sparks and shot out along the night. Roar! There were explosions on the ground and smoke spread everywhere. The bodies of countless mutated beasts were caught in the hail of bullets, causing a bloody storm. Some fragile beasts were beaten into a puddle of flesh in an instant and fell under the huge bodies that came one after another. However, even so, a large number of ferocious beasts still passed through the hail of bullets, and the bullets struck the flesh and fur, making the sound of steel clashing, and remained unscathed. These peerless ferocious beasts hidden in the mountains and forests lead the charge, getting closer and closer to the wall. They are about to break through the wall and start a bloody killing. Suddenly, there was a dull sound from the thick wall, and cracks suddenly opened in the wide earth wall. Immediately afterwards, turbulent energy fluctuations emitted from behind the wall. Countless powerful auras entwined with supernatural energy rushed out from behind the wall. Thousands of awakened beings with supernatural powers filed out of the Qingyang base and launched a fierce attack on the ferocious beasts in the distance. In an instant, a gap was opened in the surging beast tide, and countless powerful awakened people rushed into the beast tide and started a fierce battle with those bloodthirsty beasts. Most of these awakened ones are reinforcements from major bases. They are powerful and possess great powers. Some people transform into beastmen, and they can compete with ferocious beasts with the power of destroying gold and gravel using only their physical bodies. There are also some awakened souls who use telekinesis and other means to destroy the souls of these beasts from within. Energy ranging from sea level to S level was raging and reverberating in every corner of the battlefield in front of the wall. In just a few moments, the entire battlefield was covered with blood and corpses were scattered everywhere. Some scattered remains of limbs were directly trampled by the huge bodies of the surrounding ferocious beasts, and instantly turned into a puddle of flesh and melted into the earth. Yefenyan is holding a slender long sword, and the cyclone is surging around his body. The roaring hurricane turns into a cold air blade with the blessing of supernatural powers. Suddenly, Yefenyan opened his clear eyes, and rows of light green blade winds shot out in front of him under the swing of the long sword. The air blades mixed with the swirling airflow instantly turned into a peerless weapon that can cut all things. Before some low-level mutated ferocious beasts could react, they were struck on the head by the spinning air blade, leaving corpses everywhere. In the distance, the bald man roared loudly, attracting dozens of huge mutated beasts around him. "Hey, Lao Shi, haven't killed someone so happily in a long time." Shi Potion grinned and suddenly took out a blue-black box from his arms. It is the space box developed by Zilan Base. He took out a ring with a crystal core inlaid on his fingertip, pointed it at the groove on the box, and injected it fiercely. In a flash of light, a pair of heavy steel hammers appeared in his hands. His footsteps hit the ground hard, and his body slowly turned into a huge boulder from under his feet. In an instant, even Shi Potion's head was wrapped in rocks and turned into a huge rock man. Shi Potion, who transformed into a rock man, was seen holding a pair of steel hammers, shouting and rushing straight into the herd of beasts. The fangs and sharp teeth of ordinary beasts are completely useless against him who turned into a rock giant. On the contrary, Sheep-Ocean, who was wielding a pair of steel hammers, carried a huge gravity, and in just a few breaths, several mutated beasts were killed under his hammer. Not only that, explosions and roars were heard from time to time throughout the battlefield, and the sound was so huge that it was daunting. Li Yonggang, who was wearing military uniform, stood on the wall and directed his soldiers to bombard the rear of the beast tide. He wants to stop as many beasts as possible from emerging from the mountains and forests. However, even Li Yonggang never thought of it. In another corner of the wall, a slender figure wearing a black robe was sitting peacefully. The black trench coat fluttered in the wind, and not far away were the soldiers protecting the city. But these soldiers were as if they were unaware that there was such a figure sitting on the wall not far from them. Meow. The black cat in his arms seemed to have no interest in this battle. He lay in his arms and licked his hair out of boredom. It's really lively. Mu Chiu's fingers teased the kitten in his arms, and he smiled as he narrowed his eyes and looked down. It was clearly a beast tide invading, but there was no existence of destruction level on the entire battlefield. Instead, the S-level energy fluctuations frequently raged everywhere on the battlefield, and the geniuses of the major bases on weekdays showed their edge at this moment. But, as if he had discovered something, Mu Chiu's eyes suddenly flashed with brilliance, and he suddenly turned his eyes to another corner of the battlefield. A figure wearing light armor stood in the center of the battlefield, and in front of him were countless fierce beasts rushing past. Yongxiao City, the second young master of the Xiao family Xiao Yuntian. In front of him was a surging beast tide, but Xiao Yuntian stood still, closed his eyes, and slowly stretched out his hand. A peaceful energy fluctuation was brewing around him, and a clear water curtain rippled out in front of him. At the moment when the water curtain appeared, Xiao Yuntian suddenly opened his eyes, and his pupils were blue. The water curtain in front of him was rippled, like a clear lake. The next second, his lips moved, and he spoke word by word with a calm expression. Mirror flower, water moon.